Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Michael Gove. Michael Andrew Gove is a British Conservative politician, who was Secretary of State for Education from 2010 to 2014 and Secretary of State for Justice from 2015 to 2016. He became Secretary of State for Environment, Food, and Rural Affairs in the Cabinet Reshuffle on the 11th of June 2017. He has been the Member of Parliament for Surrey Heath since 2005. He is also an author and a columnist for The Times. Born in Edinburgh, Gove was raised in Aberdeen and attended Lady Margaret Hall, Oxford, where he took a BA in English, graduating with a 2:1. After which he began his career as a journalist. He was first elected to the House of Commons in the 2005 election for the safe Conservative seat of Surrey Heath. He was appointed to the Shadow Cabinet by David Cameron in 2007 as Shadow Secretary of State for Children, Schools and Families. After the formation of the coalition government in 2010, Gove was appointed Secretary of State for Education. Gove sought to expand the Academy's programme introduced by the previous Labour government. At its 2013 conference, Gove was criticised by the National Association of Head Teachers, whose members condemned the climate of bullying, fear and intimidation they said he had created during his time as Education Secretary, and passed a vote of no confidence in his policies. Votes of no confidence were passed by the Association of Teachers and Lecturers, National Union of Teachers and NASUWT at their conferences in 2013. In a 2014 cabinet reshuffle, Gove was moved to the post of Chief Whip. Following the 2015 election, Gove was promoted to the offices of Lord Chancellor and Secretary of State for Justice. In 2016, Gove played a major role in the UK's referendum on EU membership as the co-convener of Vote Leave, and along with Boris Johnson, became a key figurehead of the campaign. On the 30th of June 2016, Gove, who was campaign manager for Boris Johnson's drive to become Prime Minister, withdrew his support on the morning that Johnson was due to declare, and announced his own candidacy in the leadership election. In the first round of voting, Gove came third to Theresa May and Andrea Leadsom. He was eliminated from the leadership race on the second ballot on the 7th of July 2016. Following her appointment as Prime Minister, May did not appoint him to the cabinet on the 14th of July 2016, and he was succeeded as Lord Chancellor and Secretary of State for Justice by Liz Truss. Early life and career outside Parliament. Gove was born in Edinburgh and originally forenamed Graham by his biological mother. At the age of 4 months he was adopted by a Labour-supporting family in Aberdeen, where he was brought up. His adoptive father ran a fish processing business. His adoptive mother was a lab assistant at the University of Aberdeen before working at the Aberdeen School for the Deaf. In Aberdeen he was educated at a state school, and later attended the independent Robert Gordon's College, to which he had won a scholarship. In October 2012, Gove wrote an apology letter to his former French teacher for misbehaving in class. From 1985 to 1988 he studied English at Lady Margaret Hall, Oxford, during which time he served as president of the Oxford Union. He was awarded a 2:1 degree. He became a trainee reporter at the Press and Journal in Aberdeen, where he spent several months on strike in the 1989 1990 dispute over union recognition and representation. He joined The Times in 1996 as a leader writer, and assumed posts as its comment editor, news editor, Saturday editor and assistant editor. He has also written a weekly column on politics and current affairs for the newspaper, and contributed to the Times literary supplement, Prospect magazine and The Spectator. He remains on good terms with Rupert Murdoch, whom Gove described in evidence before the Leveson inquiry as one of the most impressive and significant figures of the last 50 years. He wrote a sympathetic biography of Michael Portillo, and a critical study of the Northern Ireland peace process, which was commissioned by the Charles Douglas Home Trust. He has worked for the BBC's Today programme, On the Record, Scottish Television and the Channel 4 current affairs programme A Stab in the Dark, alongside David Baddiel and Tracy MacLeod, and was a regular panellist on BBC Radio 4's The Moral Maze and Newsnight Review on BBC Two. Gove was a member of the winning team in Grampian Television's quiz show Top Club, and played the school chaplain in the 1995 family comedy A Feast at Midnight. Political career. He briefly joined the Labour Party in 1983 back in Aberdeen, but by the time he left to go to Oxford University, he stated that he was a Tory. Gove joined the Oxford University Conservative Association, and was secretary of Aberdeen South Young Conservatives. He helped to write speeches for cabinet and shadow cabinet ministers, including Peter Lilly and Michael Howard. When applying for a job at the Conservative Research Department, he was told he was insufficiently political and insufficiently conservative, so he turned to journalism. Gove had been chairman of Policy Exchange, a conservative think tank launched in 2002. He was involved in founding the right-leaning magazine Standpoint, to which he occasionally contributes. Gove expressed admiration in late February 2003 for new Labour Prime Minister Tony Blair, because of the way he was handling the crisis in Iraq. As a right-wing polemicist, "All I can say looking at Mr. Blair now is, what's not to like? Blair, he thought, was behaving like a true Thatcherite." Member of Parliament. Gove entered the House of Commons after the 2005 general election, having been elected as the Conservative Member of Parliament for the seat of Surrey Heath, after the incumbent MP Nick Hawkins was deselected by the local Conservative Association. When Cameron was elected as party leader in December 2005, he appointed Gove as shadow housing spokesman. Gove is seen as part of an influential set of Tories, sometimes referred to as the Notting Hill set, which includes David Cameron, George Osborne, Edward Vaizley, Nicholas Bowles and Rachel Whetstone. On the 2nd of July 2007, Gove was promoted to the Shadow Cabinet as Shadow Secretary of State for Children, Schools and Families, shadowing Ed Balls. Before the 2010 general election, most of Gove's questions in Commons debates concerned children, schools and families, education, local government, council tax, foreign affairs, and the environment. Michael Portillo said in June 2012 that Gove could be a serious contender in a future race for the Conservative leadership. Though Gove had said in an interview a few months before that, "I'm constitutionally incapable of it. There's a special extra quality you need that is indefinable, and I know I don't have it. There's an equanimity, an impermeability and a courage that you need. There are some things in life you know it's better not to try." Secretary of State for Education, 2010 to 2014. With the formation of the Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition government after the May 2010 general election, Gove became Secretary of State for Education. His first moves included reorganizing his department, announcing plans to allow schools rated as outstanding by Ofsted to become academies, and cutting the previous government school building program. He was forced to apologize. However, when the list of terminated school building projects he had released was found to be inaccurate, the list was re-announced several times before it was finally accurately published. In July 2010, GOVE said that Labour had failed in its attempt to break the link between social class and school achievement despite spending billions of pounds. Quoting research, he indicated that by the age of 6, children of low ability from affluent homes were still outperforming brighter children from poor backgrounds. At a House of Commons Education Select Committee, he said that this separation of achievement grew larger throughout people's school careers, stating, in effect, rich thick kids do better than poor clever children when they arrive at school, and the situation as they go through gets worse. Building schools for the future and school capital projects. In February 2011, a judicial review deemed GOVE's decision to axe building schools for the future projects in 6 local authority areas was unlawful, as he had failed to consult before imposing the cuts. The judge also said that, in 5 of the cases, the failure was so unfair as to amount to an abuse of power, and that, however pressing the economic problems, there was no overriding public interest which precluded consultation or justifies the lack of any consultation. The council's response was that the government would have to reconsider, but the government said it had won the case on the substantial issues. The judge made clear that, contrary to the council's position, they could not expect that their projects would be funded. In March 2011, GOVE was criticized for not understanding the importance of school architecture and having misrepresented the cost. In February 2011, he gave not quite true information to Parliament by saying that one individual made £1 million in 1 year, when the true figure was £700,000 for 5 advisors at different times over a 4-year period. He told a Free Schools conference that, "No one in this room is here to make architects richer," and specifically mentioned architect Richard Rogers. Exam and curriculum reforms. GOVE's views on exam systems became clear in December 2014 after the release of archive papers from 1986. GCSEs were the brainchild of Sir Keith Joseph and Margaret Thatcher. Believing they lacked rigor, fiercely opposed them. However, opposition to the new exams from the teaching unions persuaded her to introduce them immediately, purely so as not to appear weak. Although GOVE had sought, but failed to replace them, his special advisor, Dominic Cummings, described the 1986 decision as catastrophic, leading to collapse in the integrity of the exam system. During the 2010 Conservative Party conference, GOVE announced that the primary and secondary school national curricula for England would be restructured, and that study of authors such as Byron, Keats, Jane Austen, Dickens, and Thomas Hardy would be reinstated in English lessons as part of a plan to improve children's grasp of English literature and language. Academies are not required to follow the national curriculum, and so would not be affected by the reforms. Children who fail to write coherently and grammatically, and who are weak in spelling, would be penalized under new examinations. Historian Simon Sharma would give advice to government to ensure that pupils learnt Britain's island story standards in mathematics, and science would also be strengthened. He claimed that this was needed because left-wing ideologues had undermined education. Theirs was the view, he thought, that schools shouldn't be doing anything so old-fashioned as passing on knowledge, requiring children to work hard, or immersing them in anything like dates in history. or times tables in mathematics. These ideologues may have been inspired by generous ideals, but the result of their approach has been countless children condemned to a prison house of ignorance. In a November 2010 white paper, GOVE declared reforms would include the compulsory study of foreign languages up to the age of 16, and a shake-up of league tables in which schools are ranked higher for the number of pupils taking GCSEs in 5 core subjects: English, mathematics, science, a language, and one of the humanities. He also announced that experts such as historian Simon Sharma will be brought in to review the curriculum, and that targets are to be introduced for primary schools for the first time. Additionally, trainee teachers will spend more time in the classroom. There would be more assessment of teacher training applicants, including tests of character and emotional intelligence, and former troops will be offered sponsorship to retrain as teachers to improve discipline. Teachers are also expected to receive guidance on how to search pupils for more items, including mobile phones and pornography, and when they can use force. Closing square bracket. In April 2011, GOVE criticized schools for not studying pre-20th century classics, and blamed England's constricted and unreformed exam system for failing to encourage children to read. GOVE also blamed an anti-knowledge culture for reducing achievement, and said children benefited when expectations were set higher. In June 2011, his ignorance of science was criticized after he called for students to have a rooting in the basic scientific principles and, by way of example, assigned Lord Kelvin's laws of thermodynamics to Sir Isaac Newton. In June 2012, the Daily Mail published leaked plans to scrap GCSE examinations, return to O-level exams, and allow less able students to take less academic qualifications. The Liberal Democrats claimed that the plans had not been discussed with the Deputy Prime Minister, and were subsequently heavily criticized by some teachers, trade unions and Labour Party MPs. They had been discussed with the Prime Minister at cabinet level, and a subsequent YouGov Sunday Times poll suggested that the public supported this policy by a margin of 50% to 32%. They received praise from the Mayor Boris Johnson, who said that he could be singing a hymn of praises for my old chum GOVE and his brilliant new GOVE levels. The leaked documents also suggested that GOVE was intending to create a single exam board to organize all exams, and to scrap the national curriculum in its current form. However, there were rebukes from both the Welsh and Northern Ireland education ministers who said it was important to communicate before making announcements on proposed changes to jointly owned qualifications. In February 2013, shortly after the draft programs of study for history in the national curriculum was released by the DFE, the representatives of the principal organisations for historians in the UK wrote to The Observer to register significant reservations about its contents and the way in which it had been devised. In March 2013, 100 academics wrote to warn of the dangers posed by Michael Gove's new national curriculum. Gove retorted that, "There is good academia and bad academia." In response, one signatory to the letter opined that Gove suffered from a blinkered, almost messianic, self-belief, which appears to have continually ignored the expertise and wisdom of teachers, head teachers, advisors and academics, whom he often claims to have consulted, while one of the country's leading education experts, and the person who headed up the biggest review of British primary education in 40 years. Cambridge's Robin Alexander declared, "It's surely proper to ask whether heaping abuse on members of the electorate because they hold different views is what government in a democracy is about. A senior civil servant then admitted that one of the most controversial parts of the proposed secondary curriculum had been written internally by the DFE, without any input from experts. In May, Simon Sharma, earlier mooted as a supporter of GOVE's reforms of the history curriculum, delivered an excoriating speech in which he characterized the finalized proposals as insulting and offensive and pedantic and utopian, accusing GOVE of constructing a ridiculous shopping list of subjects. He urged the audience at the Hay Festival, "Tell Michael Gove what you think of it. Let him know." In June, leaked documents revealed that a member of the government's curriculum advisory group had described the reform process as having had a very chaotic feel. It's typical of government policy. At the moment, they don't think things through very carefully, they don't listen to anyone, and then just go ahead and rush into major changes. In September, Robin Alexander said that the proposed reforms to the primary level national curriculum were neo-Victorian, educationally inappropriate, and pedagogically counterproductive. In October, almost 200 people, including Carol Ann Duffy, Melvin Burgess and Michael Rosen, as well as academics from Oxford, Bristol, and Newcastle, signed a letter to the Times condemning GOVE's reforms, warning of the enormous and negative risks they pose to children and their education. That same month saw Oxford's head of admissions warn that the timetable for secondary-level reforms would just wreck the English education system. 2012 English GCSE results. In September 2012, following the furore surrounding the downgrading of GCSE English results, he refused, during his answers to the Parliamentary Education Committee on 12 September, to instruct Ofqual to intervene, and attacked his Welsh counterpart as irresponsible and mistaken for ordering disputed GCSEs to be regraded. On 17 September he announced to the House of Commons an English baccalaureate certificate to replace GCSE, comprising English, Maths, Science, together with a humanities subject and language, to be first examined in 2017. His plans to replace GCSE examinations with an English baccalaureate were rejected by Parliament in February 2013. Education vouchers. As Shadow Secretary of State for Children, Schools and Families, GOVE advocated the introduction of a Swedish-style voucher system, whereby parents can choose where their child should be educated, with the state paying what they would have cost in a state school. He has also advocated Swedish-style free schools, to be managed by parents and funded by the state, with the possibility that such schools may be allowed to be run on a for-profit model. Creationist schools. In June 2012, GOVE approved 3 creationist schools, such as Grindon Hall Christian School in Sunderland, which opened in September 2012. This led to concerns about whether Department for Education requirements not to teach creationism or intelligent design as science would be met. The other creationist schools included Exemplar Newark Business Academy, whose previous application was rejected because of concerns over creationism, and a third school in Kent. Both of these schools said they would teach creationism in but not in science. The British Humanist Association said teaching creationism in any syllabus was unacceptable. In 2014, GOVE's department acceded to the BARS campaign by banning creationism from being taught as science in state-funded English schools, including academies and free schools, as well as introducing a requirement that such schools must teach evolution, children's homes, scandal and data protection rules. In September 2013, news that the DfE did not maintain a register of children's homes in the UK came to light as a result of an article GOVE wrote for the Daily Telegraph. GOVE asserted his prior ignorance and surprise that the department did not hold this information, and claimed that Ofsted was prevented by data protection rules, child protection concerns, and other bewildering regulations from sharing that data with us, or even with the police. GOVE's claim was refuted the same day by the Information Commissioner, Sir Christopher Graham, who pointed out there was nothing in data protection legislation that prevents vulnerable young people from being properly protected in care homes. Graham noted that his law covers information about people, so it has no bearing on the disclosure of non-personal information like the location of care homes, and said he would be writing to both GOVE and Sir Michael Wilshire about the matter. Birmingham Schools Row. In June 2014, a very public argument arose between the Home Office and Department for Education ministers about responsibility for alleged extremism in Birmingham schools, which required PM David Cameron's intervention to resolve. The Prime Minister asked GOVE to apologise to Home Office for Security and Counter-Terrorism head Charles Farr for briefings critical of him, which appeared on the Times front page. Criticism from the teaching profession. GOVE was criticised by teachers' unions for his attempts to overhaul British education. At the Association of Teachers and Lecturers annual conference in March 2013, a motion of no confidence in GOVE was passed. This was followed up the next month at the annual conference of the National Union of Teachers, who unanimously passed a vote of no confidence in GOVE, the first time in its history that it performed such an action, and called for his resignation. The audience at the NUT conference were told that GOVE had lost the confidence of the teaching profession, failed to conduct his duties in a manner befitting the head of a national education system, and chosen to base policy on dogma, political rhetoric, and his own limited experience of education. GOVE was further criticised at the May 2013 conference of the National Association of Head Teachers for what they claimed was a climate of bullying, fear and intimidation. During his time as Education Secretary, the conference passed a vote of no confidence in his policies. Changes to pay, pensions, and workloads were also controversial. The NUT and NASUWT staged strikes on a regional basis in October 2013, although a national strike was averted after talks failed. Strike action affecting 10,000 schools took place in March 2014. Sarah Vine, GOVE's wife, accused socialists of sending their family vicious and aggressive death threats due to GOVE's education reforms, and said that she had considered moving with their 2 children to Italy as a result of said threats. Before the coalition government, in 2010, a YouGov poll of teachers' voting intentions found that 33% were Tory and 32% were Labour. 4 years later, a poll found that only 16% were Tory and 57% were Labour. Reshuffle. On 15 July 2014, GOVE's 4-year stint in charge of the Department for Education came to an end, when he was replaced as Secretary of State for Education by former Treasury Minister Nicky Morgan in a wide-ranging cabinet reshuffle, and moved to the post of Government Chief Whip. This was portrayed as a demotion by his detractors. Although Prime Minister David Cameron denied this was the case, Gove told BBC News that he had mixed emotions about starting the new role, saying it was a privilege to become Chief Whip, but that leaving the Department for Education was a wrench. Government Chief Whip 2014-2015. Following Gove's appointment as Chief Whip in July 2014, his first day in office was marred by a defeat on an impromptu opposition 10-minute rule bill division, at which time Gove was speaking to Labour backbencher Bill Esterson outside the toilets to the I lobby, prompting Shadow Commons leader Angela Eagle to jibe that he not only lost his first vote, but he managed to get stuck in the toilet in the wrong lobby and he nearly broke his own whip. New Leader of the House, William Hague, did not deny the incident took place, and light-heartedly defended Gove by stating to the House, "Knowledge of who is in the toilets in whatever lobby is a very important piece of information for any Chief Whip. And I take this as evidence that he was carrying out his duties very assiduously." Secretary of State for Justice 2015-2016. After the 2015 general election, Prime Minister David Cameron promoted Gove as Lord Chancellor and Justice Secretary in his newly formed cabinet. He was praised in December 2015 for scrapping the court's fee introduced by his predecessor, Chris Grayling. The fee had been heavily criticised for, among other things, causing innocent people to plead guilty out of financial concerns. Gove removed the 12-book limit on prison books introduced by Grayling, arguing that books increased literacy and numeracy, skills needed for making prisoners a potential asset to society. The move, effective from September 2015, was welcomed by Francis Cook of the Howard League for Penal Reform. Gove was also praised for his prominent role in scrapping a British bid for a Saudi prison contract. Within 3 months of his taking office, the Criminal Bar Association voted to stop taking new work in protest at Gove's insistence that they work for lower fees. The CBA subsequently praised his courage in reversing the proposed cuts. On 14 July 2016, Gove was removed from the position of Justice Secretary by the new Prime Minister, Theresa May. Thank you for watching. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Please like and subscribe below. Please like and subscribe below.